Yeah, today I'd like to talk about Adolfina Raitzin, later known as Monina Tavora in Brazil. She was the guitar professor to the Abreu brothers and the Assad brothers. Now Sergio Assad is teaching at the Conservatory of Music San Francisco. One of my clients who was born in Brazil studies with him sporadically and takes his class in Portuguese. So I'm going to read from my Annotations of the History of Classical Guitar, Volume 2. This is a 4-volume, 21-pound book I spent 17 plus years on, and it sells for $300, shipping included. And on page 1157, I'm going to begin. This biography of Adolfina Raitzin is translated from Ricardo Muñoz's unpublished book Historia Universal de la Guitarra, Volume 8, La Escuela Tática en la Argentina. Adolfina Raitzin, her origin. She was born in Buenos Aires on the 3rd of May, 1921. At the age of 7, she began the guitar with the great Domingo Prat. Her satisfactory evolution classified her as a child prodigy. She also learned the lute and received advice from the eminent guitarist Andres Segovia. At 9 years of age, she was heard by the critic of the daily La Prensa in the Salon La Argentina, who following day said, "She has now arrived at a good dominion of the instrument, so much to the technical point of view as of the sound that is ample and blended. Such musicality proved as praiseworthy intuition. It was worth the warm applause." Her virtuosity. The 5th of December of 1933, she was presented by her maestro in the hall of the Consejo Nacional de Mujeres, where she interpreted Haydn, Aguado, Lenani, Sor, Giuliani, Tarraga, Allard, Moreno Torroba, Malatz, Lopez Chavari, and Albanese, of whose performance La Prensa reported, "Her dominion of the resources of the instrument is much better than could be expected from a girl of such a young age. And her elegant musical sense, not totally developed, though impregnated at times childishness, which isn't a defect, since that turns out to be preferable to have a premonition to go through that. The future artist to hear interpretations taught by her maestro were proper and warmly appreciated by the audience." La Nación on the same date said she has revealed the possession of the excellent endowments for the cultivation of the musical interpretation by the means of the chosen instrument. She has a good dominion over these, demonstrating considerable technical abilities, but her most outstanding characteristic is her sense of expression, always adequate to the character of the phrases that she performs, and a delicate music sensibility. On the 31st of August of 1934, for the Asociación Guitarrística Argentina, Argentine Guitar Club, in the La Salle Hall, she interpreted Gavotta by Rameau, Nocturno by Carcassi, Andantino by Giuliani, Courant by Bach, Iravi by Pratt, Berkus by Schumann, Estudio by Sor, and Variaciones de Mozart Sor, the magic flute. The maestros, aficionados, and the rest of the knowledgeable listeners to the concert toasted the young player with well-deserved applause. In the Amigos del Arte, she performed on the 12th of September of 1936, and the critic said, "A rich temperament, clear and clean technique, a pure and blended sound, and a suggestive musicality." In 1937, she gave another concert in the same institution, performing works by Bach, Diabelli, Navas, Aguirre, Luna, Hilardi, Broqua, Moreno Torroba, and Torina, which the local press duly praised. On the 23rd of July of 1939, in homage of the great Fernando Sor, On the occasion of the centennial of his death, she performed studies numbers 5, 8, 9, 11, 13, 14, and 23 in the hall of the Asociación Guitarrística Argentina, preceded by her lecture by Professor Doña Maria E.P. Navas about the life of the eminent artist. The next year, in the same entity, she gave a performance with an equal success as before, the same on the 27th of September of 1941 in the Sala La Salle, where the audience awarded her with a real din of applause. Later, we find her in the city of Rio de Janeiro, the owner of a fine Hermann Hauser guitar, Hermann Hauser I, with which she offered some concerts, and she visited the United States to be devotedly applauded. Here we have a photo of her at a young age. That is from the Caras y Caretas magazine, January 13th, 1934, issue number 1841, año 37. Miss Adolfina Raitzin, a precocious guitarist of 12 years old, whose first performances have been an artistic revelation. Then I'm going to read from June-July 1951 Guitar News magazine, published in England by Wilfred Appleby. He wrote a lot of articles in BMG magazine, published in London in the early 1940s. Here, Adolfina's concert shows she is interpreting works from the 17th century to modern composers. The guitarists and guitar lovers of Sao Paulo were eagerly looking forward to a visit from Maria Luisa Anido in April. The Guitar Gazette program, presented for broadcasting each Sunday by Romuald Simoes, has now been extended to 30 minutes. The Argentine guitarist Adolfina Raitzin de Tavora recently gave a recital at the National School of Music, which included chorus number 1 by Villa-Lobos, works by Turibio Santos, Aguirre, as well as the classical music of Bach, Handel, and Debussy. In the Momento Musical Revista Mensual Ilustrada, illustrated monthly magazine published in Buenos Aires in November 1936, issue number 2, año 1, first year. In the concierto section is a review of a concert by Adolfina Raitzin. She revealed notable and lyrical qualities in the full artistic bloom, which time and study can be splendidly fruitful. Adolfina Raitzin, interpreter of the guitar, who unites to her rich temperament, information, a clear and clean technique, a pure and blended sound, stimulating musicality, and a program integrated with classic and modern works that she developed in the hall of the Amigos del Arte. This little interpreter amply distinguishes these pleasant, attractive, and ponderable musical qualities. Signed, Mayorino Ferraria. Now we have from the Revista de la Guitarra magazine, issue number 4 from December 1939, año 1. This was the organ of the AGA, the Asociación Guitarrística Argentina. It was monthly to becoming sporadic. I have about 11 issues out of all that exist. It really added a lot of flavor to my book. Translation, Unjustified Critique. In the music section of Noticias Gráficas, graphic notices are Casa Recorded by monthly publication, 16th of November edition, announcing the concierto in that the homage to Fernando Sor that took place by the duo Maya Lopez and Tola. They made valuations that can be entrusted by this associación, that the only entity created to make the guitaristic literature known. Now with the commentary, among other things, says, The date that marks the century of the disappearance of Fernando Sora has passed almost unnoticed by our cultural circles and by those entities that have created for diffusion the creative values originated on the guitar. The board of directors of the Asociación Guitarrística Argentina has completed with its duty to offer in its opportunity the homage due to the memory of Sor, already which this institution only in the month of July had 3 concerts dedicated to the remembrance of his life, of which those had sent all the corresponding programs and invitations to the daily newspapers, directed as always to the name of the chief of the section. Besides, they have given lectures concerning the same Miss Maria E. Pascual Navas, Pratt student, to whom Miss Adolfina Raitzin backed up in the musical part, and Mr. Amilcar S. Verdier in the Teatro Lírico, El Fogón, Círculo de Profesores Egresados del Conservatorio Nacional La Peña, and El Unisono by extension of the AGA, the Asociación Guitarrística Argentina. It's exceedingly strange that they assure a thing that isn't the truth, since we believe that in this case the journalist has had been misinformed, formulating judgments that can be a disadvantage for the future of this association. This from the Revista de la Guitarra magazine, issue 10, Año 4 from December 1942. Various 1941 concerts and radio performances. In the Teatro del Pueblo on the 16th of October, a recital of ancient songs of the 15th and 18th centuries entrusted to Adolfina Raitzin, lute, Florencia Raitzin, clavichord, Jorge O. Payan, voice. All had a brilliant performance, and overall our fellow member, the guitarist Adolfina Raitzin, whose excellent abilities for the music has proven once again not only through the guitar but the lute that she performs with outstanding mastery. The program was comprised of in its majority of anonymous songs of those centuries and pages by Scarlatti, Mozart, Pergolesi, etc. Every interpretation deserved the unanimous applause of the public. I show the original scan from each magazine when I have it. This next one is from the Revista de la Guitarra magazine, issue number 13, Año 6 of September 1945. From our correspondents, from Rio de Janeiro, our member correspondent, Professor Oswaldo Suarez, communicates to us his impressions about the performance by radio of our compatriot, the guitarist Adolfina Raitzin de Tavora. I need to tell you that Oswaldo Suarez was the person you would go to in Rio de Janeiro to get a Simplicio guitar. I have those advertisements that he had in magazines from the Old Vilao, etc., in the book, in the luthier section. According to the competent Professor Suarez, Mrs. Raitzin de Tavora on Ondas Musicales, musical waves, unfolding the most interesting program of classical music with the surprising success by her fitting technique, her fine expression and sureness. On our part, we must add that Mrs. Raitzin de Tavora, in her time in our local medium, had the opportunity to demonstrate her excellent abilities as a guitarist, by which it isn't strange to us that in the Carioca capital she might be admired with devotion by the true lovers of the exquisite art. From June and July 1953, Guitar News, issue number 13, it mentions that on the 8th of June 1953, a concert for Adolfina Raitzin de Tavora, who became known as Monina Tavora in Brazil as well, and other countries she concertized in. This concert was announced by the New York Times Musical Notes section on June 8, 1953. The Society of the Classical Guitar, the Society of the Classic Guitar in New York, presented a 5-part program at its 64th concert on March 21st. Part 1 consisted of Max Shame's guitar in duos and trios with recorders. In Part 2, Ethne Golden sang 6 interesting songs with guitar. Manuel Gayol, who recorded LPs, played guitar solos in Part 3, Andantino and Allegro by Soar, Minuet, Napoleon Cost, Danza, Estudio, and Gavotta by Tarraga. Part 4 was for voice and guitar, Lena Bardi, soprano, with Vladimir Bobry and Julio Prol on guitars. In Part 5, these 2 guitarists were joined by a flautist, R. Furnilich, in Divertimento in G by J.M. Compter, Ave Maria Bach-Gounod, Galliada by F. Durante, Entr'acte by Jacques Ibert. The guitars were by Hauser and Munch, strung with Augustine strings. The next concert, June 8th, will be a guitar recital by Monina Tavora at the Carl Fischer Concert Hall. Monina Tavora is a new name to many of our readers, but it is a name to note. Our New York friends were thrilled with the excellent guitar recital which she gave at the Carl Fischer Hall on June 8th. She had many recitals in her native Argentina and other South America lands, but Society of Classic Guitar sponsored her first appearance in North America, and she proved worthy of their faith in her. I was about 4 years old when that happened. Above is from Guitar News magazines, issue number 14, August-September 1953. Below is from the Guitar News magazine number 72 of July-August 1963. This is the Villa-Lobos week, November 1962, written by Jodacil Damasceno from Brazil. There are videos of him playing on YouTube. This year, the week of Villa-Lobos, which is commemorated on the date of his birth, was sponsored by the National Council of Culture of the Brazilian Ministry of Education. It was organized, as usual, by the Villa-Lobos Museum, which is directed by Menina Villa-Lobos, widow of the composer. The commemorations consisted of public concerts, radio and television programs, and a lecture delivered by the young poet Herminio Bello de Carvalho at the Ministry of Education. The lecture was introduced by the director of the council, Ambassador Pachol Carlos Mano. Herminio Bello de Carvalho pointed out that it was really an anti-lecture because he himself, as a poet, hated lectures as Villa-Lobos did. He intends publishing a book in which he will tell about Villa-Lobos and the choros. It is the name of one who belongs to the group who plays the choros, a typical music of Brazil. Villa-Lobos then was a chorale. In this book, he will dedicate a special chapter to the guitar, an instrument which played a very important part in the composer's work. During the lecture, Herminio Bello de Carvalho played a recording of Introdução e Choros, Introduction to the Choros, written in 1929 for guitar and orchestra soloist Jose Menendez. The composer Donga Ernesto dos Santos and old-time companion of Villa-Lobos in the chorale, like the great master, narrated a few incidents of their adventures as the young man. He also played on a tape recorder 2 recordings of Villa-Lobos himself playing the guitar, Coro number 1 and Prelude number 1. There exists a commercial recording by Villa-Lobos of the first one, but the recording of the Prelude number 1 is a private one, which is kept by Mrs. Villa-Lobos without ever having been played in public before. That's pretty special. The lecture was illustrated by the guitarist Jodacil Damasceno and Turibio Santos, and by the soprano Cristino Marastani. Jodacil Damasceno played Prelude number 1 and Etudes number 1 and 8. Turibio Santos played Preludes number 3 and 2 and Etudes number 7 and 11. Mr. Damiano and Miss Maristani gave her first performance of Monina, which is the 5th of a series of 14 songs and Canção do Poeta do Século XVIII, Song of the Poet of the 18th century, both in a version by Villa-Lobos himself. The lecture was broadcast by the radio of the Ministry of Education. Among the people who attended the lecture were Mozart de Abreu, musicologist and lecturer, member of the Brazilian Academy of Music, who published a treatise on Monina, which is a very special kind of Brazilian song coming from Portugal. Andrade Maurici, a critic of the Jornal do Comércio and biographer of Villa-Lobos. Professor Renzo Massariani, critic of the Jornal do Brasil. Mario Cabral, critic of the Tribuna da Imprensa, who wrote the notes on poppy music for the Brazilian edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Ismael Silva, important composer. Monina Tavora, Adolfina Raitzin, ex-pupil of Andres Segovia and Paco Aguilar. Professor Antonio Rubeo, Professor Vieira Brandão, to whom Villa-Lobos dedicated many of his compositions, and others. Also during the lecture, Herminio Baio de Carvalho showed the audience a guitar which was given to Villa-Lobos by Mrs. Tomás Teixeira. The Jornal do Brasil referred to the lecture as colorful and extremely efficient. On a later date, Herminio Baio de Carvalho gave another short lecture about the Villa-Lobos on television, when he pointed out another composition by Villa-Lobos of great importance it had in its first performance that week, namely the Sexto Místico. For guitar, celesta, saxophone, flute, oboe, and harp. The National Council of Culture included this lecture in its program for cultural expansion all over Brazil. This is from the Guitar News magazine, issue number 72 of July and to August 1963. It's a photo of the Abreu brothers, Sergio and Eduardo, with Monina Tavora. It says Sergio and Eduardo Abreu are sons and grandsons of guitar players. Before really starting their public careers, they met a former student of Andres Segovia, the Argentine guitarist Adolfina Raitzin de Tavora, now residing in Rio de Janeiro, who for the last 7 years has been guiding them through lessons of advanced interpretation and technique. This is from the Guitar News magazine, number 94 of June-August to 1967. It is worthy to note that Adolfina Raitzin de Tavora's students, besides the Abreu brothers, were the Assad brothers, Turibio Santos, etc. Adolfina de Tavora passed away on Wednesday, August 17, 2011. I'd like to show a couple photos from the Guitar News magazine, number 72, July-August 1963. I hope I have this positioned rather well. So we see Villa-Lobos seated, and in the top picture we have Ismael Silva, Jacob Bittencourt, Mozart Abreu, member of the Brazilian Academy of Music, Cristina Maristani, soprano, Donga Ernesto dos Santos, friend of Villa-Lobos, Mrs. Villa-Lobos, Herminio Baio de Carvalho, poet, Monina Tavora, guitarist, Jodocil Damasceno, guitarist, Turibio Santos, and Mario Cabral of the Tribuna de Imprensa, pianist. In the bottom we have showing Mrs. Villa-Lobos with Segovia, Andres, and Hector Villa-Lobos. Also with HÉCTOR is a way he would be responding to being called. HÉCTOR, come here. Also Nicanor Zabaleta, harpist. So here's Segovia, HÉCTOR Villa-Lobos, Nicanor Zabaleta, very famous harpist. One of my local friends, Andres Faz, who's now 88 years old, he did concerts with Sabicas and Carmen Amaya in 1963, played all the capitals of the provinces of Mexico, and he's a guitarist that lives here in the Bay Area, and I've known him since 1987. His son, Andres Jr., studied with Nicanor Zabaleta. I'm going to continue to read. Here's a picture of Adolfina Raitzin, circa 1941, with a guitar lute. You see this photo on YouTube with as a background for one of the audios that's shown. These are the words of Sergio Abreu after hearing of the passing of his maestro. Portuguese translation by Randolph Osborne. I cannot summarize my experience briefly with Miss Monina. She was an encyclopedia of music, life, style, character, a consistency of artistic integrity. There was nothing common about her. She was a deeply complex person. However, she could show simplicity in everything she did in music. This is immediately confirmed when you hear a classical guitar interpretation by her. Everything in place, all well-meaning and thought out, all elegant, nothing contrived or pretentious. Her interpretation comes from the direction contained in the music itself, without resorting to any artificial feature, with a simplicity that only the wise can achieve. I lived with her since I was 12 years old, and I can say without a doubt or any exaggeration that without her I wouldn't have had the career I had, neither as a musician or a luthier. Driven by the hand of our grandfather, my brother Eduardo and me realized since our first meeting that we were to be dealing with a human being without peer. We knew that we were getting a unique gift, and her friendly presence remained with us during the half-century that has passed since then. It was greater than the physical distance separating us. Adolfina Raitzin was born in Argentina on May 3rd, 1921. She had a different childhood. Her father was a revolutionary psychiatrist who treated the mentally ill in freedom, which is why the location where he established his clinic was named the Open Door. And it was created with those patients, and he had their school with them, who were his teachers. Maybe that helped form the unique human being that she had become. From early on, she studied classical guitar with Domingo Prat, who referred to her in terms of superlatives in his Dicionario de Guitarristas y Guitarreros, published in 1934, and piano with Ricardo Viñas during the period where he lived in Argentina from 1930 to 1936. Incidentally, Ricardo Viñas, 1875 to 1943, the famous Catalan pianist who lived in Paris during the first 3 decades of the 20th century, was the favorite interpreter of Debussy and Ravel, starring many of their compositions, many of them dedicated to him, and he was also responsible for the first public performance of the Iberia Suite by Albanese. Adolfina decided definitely on the guitar when she was introduced to Andres Segovia, and he invited her to study with him, but she never had abandoned the piano. In her diary, she wrote that day, "I played for Segovia today, and he enjoyed my playing. I promised to be a great artist. I studied with Segovia regularly for several years, and the words that he had were always more flattering and affectionate. I was one of the few people who had, in fact, sequential lessons and a prolonged relationship with the great guitarist." On the wall, she kept an old framed photo of Segovia with the dedication, "To Adolfina Raitzin, a muse and an artist. I also had the opportunity to see some musical manuscripts that she received from the Maestra with beautiful calligraphy and careful fingering. During her youth, Adolfina Raitzin had the opportunity to make friends with the musicians of various nationalities who were staying at the farm of her parents when they played in Buenos Aires. Among them, I remember the names of Yehudi Menuhin, William Campbell, Henry Searing, and the latter was thrilled when I mentioned her name after he gave a wonderful concert in New York, only to guests at the Center for Inter-American Relations on Park Avenue. In the early 1940s, she married the Brazilian geologist Eusébio Tavora. Shortly after the marriage, she received a letter from Segovia, then in the middle of a tour, in which he expressed surprise at the unexpected news of the marriage and promised her a present when he returned to Montevideo. He wished the couple happiness, but above all, he hoped she'd never do justice to an old Spanish proverb that said, "The pretty woman is a paradise for the eyes, purgatory for the wallet, and hell for the soul." Adolfina Raitzin went to live in Rio de Janeiro, where she lived for over 30 years and had two Brazilian sons, Rui Alejandro Tavora and Virgilio Raitzin Tavora, both career diplomats. While she visited her native country regularly, she moved back to Argentina in 1977, just when her husband retired, having given up a lot of her young concert career. Yet she continued to perform sporadically in public or on radio broadcasts. In 1950, having adopted the stage name Monina Tavora, she performed a recital at the National School of Music in Rio de Janeiro that caused astonishment in the music scene in Rio. From then on, she became much requested by several guitarists in the city. At the same time, she established a solid friendship, especially with my grandfather, Antonio Rebello, who in turn introduced him to my father, Osmar Abreu, and his student, Jodachael Damasceno, who studied with her for a relatively brief but extremely useful time. In the early 1950s, Adolfina Raitzin spent 2 years with her husband and children in the United States when she received several invitations to restart her musical career. During that American period, she spent a week in Lakefield working with Wanda Landowska, interpretations of Renaissance and Baroque music. Her last concert took place in public at the Carl Fischer Hall in New York in 1953, shortly before her return to Rio de Janeiro, with overwhelming success of both public and critical, which the guitar reviewed to the event as brilliant Argentine guitarist Monina Tavora in a smashing debut at the Carl Fischer Hall. I was surprised by her legion of admirers that I met in the city when I was there for the first time in 1970. It was in 1960 that my brother and I were presented to her by our grandfather, and we had regular classes for the next 10 years. From the end of the decade, she began teaching intensive also for the brothers Sergio and Odair Assad. Admired and respected by guitarists in Rio, she was. However, they also feared because of her reputation as a perfectionist, demanding and uncompromising. As a result, her greatest friends in music in Rio de Janeiro were not guitarists. Among her close friends and admirers, the couples were Francisco and Liddy Mignon, the couple Arnaldo Estrella and Mariuccia Giacovino, and critic Antonio Hernandez. They were also frequent visitors to her spacious apartment on the Avenida Rui Barbosa, with stunning views over the Bay of Guanabara. Pianist Antonio Guedes Barbosa and Arnaldo Cohen, cellist Ibere Gomez, grosso harpsichordist Roberto de Regina, and the singers, violinists, and composers. Unfortunately, not all of her advice was practical or feasible. Having been a great admirer of the composer Adino Krieger, Krieger. She recently told me of a meeting that took place years ago in which she urged him to drop the bureaucratic paperwork that was in the Fonarte to devote himself entirely to composition, telling him, "Mr. Adino, a composer in your category and your talent has no right to waste your time with anything other than music. Mrs. Monina, I am unable to make a living only as a composer. If I quit this job, I will starve. Mr. Adino, go hungry, but just make music." Shortly after exchanging a career as a concert guitarist to become a luthier, I decided to make a guitar especially for her. For her review and comments were invaluable, and to my great surprise and happiness, that instrument I sent in 1984 stimulated her to play again, but not in public. But from then on, Mrs. Monina made many recordings using a cassette tape recorder until a serious illness known as Guillain-Barré syndrome, which nearly took her life in the mid-1990s and impeded her ability to continue to play. Although not professional sound quality, yet these recordings clearly show her exceptional musical and guitar style. I've had those tapes with me for almost 10 years. I'll be waiting for a chance to talk personally with her surviving son about what to do with them, since she herself was opposed to disclosure and much less marketing. They must be wonderful. In 2000, Mrs. Monina Tavora returned with her husband to Rio de Janeiro, where she stayed for 5 years. A widow, she returned to Argentina to spend her last years in the house of her eldest son, Open Door, the same region where she had spent her childhood and adolescence. Her health suffered a devastating blow with the untimely death in October of the year before of her younger son, Virgilio. I had hoped that after the initial impact she would gradually recover. This unfortunately did not happen, and she died at noon on Wednesday, August 17th, 2011, in Rio de Janeiro. Here are some impressions by the colleagues of Monina Tavora accumulated by Argentine guitarist Daniel Cabrillo, Spanish translation by Randy Osborne. Monina Tavora, guitarist and lute player, also plays and teaches piano, based on many years in Brazil, a guitar where educational and development work is currently in Buenos Aires. She continues here teaching a group of very prominent musicians. Among her pupils, we can mention that from the famous brothers Sergio and Eduardo Abreu, a duo for years regarded as the most perfect in the world, to the Assad brothers, which the New York Times with the following words refers to the duo. They are virtually a perfect ensemble, almost miraculous. Brazilian guitarist Darcy Villa-Verde, first-time winner in Paris. Pianist Claudio Evelson, first prize winner in Philadelphia, USA, and others. Many brilliant musicians have belonged to the school of Monina Tavora or are disciples, such as Turibio Santos, J. Damasceno. Some judgments about Monina Tavora. Yehudi Menuhin said, "Just to be the teacher of the Abreu brothers and Assad brothers could have no better recommendation for teaching." Andres Segovia, a muse and a great performer. Maria Luisa Nito, she is a genius at teaching, amazed by extraordinary art, a real great artist. Sergio Abreu, incredibly beautiful sound, intelligence, wisdom, sensitivity, balance, a moving flow. Her music is the essence of the guitar. A guitar review in the United States said, "The recital of Monina Tavora was the brightest of this or any season." Juan Pedro Franz said, "Superb conceptual maturity, technical pedigree, pure musicianship, a very sublimated and refined art of interpretation." Lucas Foss from the United States, "You and your students are wonderful." O Globo by journalist Antonio Hernandez in Brazil remarked, "A good guitar is somewhat uncommon. The phenomenon is rare. Of two excellent guitarists, four great guitarists is amazing." Monina Tavora repeats the miracle of the Abreu brothers with the Assads. Ronaldo Brazil, Ronaldo Miranda, journalist. The secure domain of the instrument, the perfect identity of sound, the phrasing and dynamic flexibility identified the magnificent duo Assad to the exceptional school of Monina. Tavora, also responsible for this phenomenon, is the duo Abreu. Eurico Nogueira Franca from Brazil. If their teacher since childhood, Menino Tavora, has finished teaching their studies with the Abreu, it would have done something truly lovely as a contribution to the universal culture of music, because those guys are not only our own anymore, they are the heritage of the civilized world and well regarded throughout the world. Here I show a image of a Wigmore Hall concert of the Abreu brothers, and this is from the Guitar News of August 1968, issue 99. Then I'm going to read the article he had about Oder and Sergio Assad. On June 11th, for the last meeting before the summer vacation, the Society of the Classical Guitar in New York presented two delightful youngsters from Brazil, Oder and Sergio Assad, whom we shall certainly hear more of in the years to come. This remarkable guitar duo has been attending school in Michigan since January under the sponsorship of the Youth for Understanding program, an international teenage student exchange program. Sergio, 16, Oder, 12 years of age, have been studying in Brazil with Mrs. Monina Tavora, and the Brazilian consulate in New York arranged and sponsored this concert, their first international performance before their return home. So this particular beginning of an article, I think it is, or it's just that review is from the Guitar News, issue number 105 from October 1969. 50 years after she began her studies with Domingo Prat, Adolfina Raitzin, later known as Monina Tavora, was continuing to create world's music treasures with her students. While in Brazil, she recorded a live concert and some test pressings of pieces she liked very much that were made. Some of the songs were by Federico Moreno Torriba, Sonatina in La Mayor. First movement, Allegretto, Monina Tavora, Roberto Davisi, Suite in Re minor, Minuetto 1, Beret, Minuetto 2, Gavotte, Sarabande, recorded live, not commercially available. These were played on a Fabio Zanin radio show after she died. Her interpretation sounded like her maestro, Andres Segovia, just as much as Albel Calavaro sounded like his maestro in the 1950s as well. Sergio Abreu said in 1996, in the beginning we had 15 classes in 15 days, individual classes 3 to 4 hours a day. In the same interview, he said he received a 1920 Santos that had belonged to Menino Tavora. From Domingo Prat's Dicionario de Guitarristas, we gather more details. Adolfina Raitzin was a child prodigy guitarist. She was born in Buenos Aires on the 3rd of May of 1921. In the program of the concert given by Adolfina Raitzin on the 5th of December 1933 in the Salón de Actos of the Consejo Nacional de Mujeres was the following presentation. At 7 years of age in 1928, she began her studies of the guitar with this writer. Her rapid progress soon revealed to us in her case was nothing common. In spite of my last voyage to Europe, she continued studying, affirming her value in a performance made in 1931. Today, as we did in the last year with her sister Silvia Ines Raitzin, we presented Adolfina to show the evolutionary process in which we are set on doing disciple and maestro Domingo Prat. These were the works that comprised the said performance: Andante by Haydn, Allegro Moderato, Studio 12 by Aguado, Capriccio No. 20 by Lenani, Larghetto Comodo, Studio 23 by Sor Andantino Giuliani, second set, Mazurka in Sol by Targa, Studio Alard by Targa, Cajita de Musica Targa, Sueño, tremolo piece by Targa. Third set, Preludio by Moreno Torreba, Serenata by Malats, Ritmo Popular, Opus number 2, Lopez Chavati, Sevilla by Albanese. Of the success of this set act, the dailies of the following day, La Prensa among them said, "The young guitarist has proved her worth. She possesses the dominion of the instrument and a musical sense." Last night in the salon of the Biblioteca Nacional del Consejo Mujeres, the young guitarist Adolfina Raitzin made her presentation, which in the performance and interpretation of the difficult program reveal her precocity, her dominion of the resources of the instrument that is much better than what you would expect of a girl of a very young age, and her elegant musical sense, not completely developed and though impregnated in times of infancy, which isn't a defect, since that is preferable to turn out to present to cross that the artistic future to hear her interpretations taught by her maestro. They were duly and hotly appreciated by the audience, who knew how to award just and sure versions by Haydn, Aguado Linani, Sor, Giuliani Targa, Allard Targa, Moreno Torreba, Malats, Lopez Chavati, and Albanese, which affirm the endowments already mentioned. Adolfina Raitzin, since in the art with the best auspices, she already achieved a lot as for being a performer and an interpreter. She lacks now the time and culture that will develop the best of those technical and musical qualities that promise so much and are so abundant of the well-deserved applause she conquered last evening. La Nación, in its turn, expressed it in this way. In the Salón de Actos de la Biblioteca del Consejo Nacional de Mujeres last night, the announced guitar concert entrusted to the young instrumentalist Adolfina Raitzin was presented for the first time before our public. Miss Raitzin revealed the possession of excellent endowments for the cultivating of the musical interpretation by means of her chosen instrument. She has a good dominion over that, showing praiseworthy technical abilities, but her most outstanding characteristic is her sense of expression. The character is always adequate for the phrases performed in a delicate musical sensibility. It is evident and logical for her age that she is an interpreter in formation, but the qualities put in relief permit us to cherish the hope of her future as a promising concert guitarist. The program was composed of works by Haydn, Aguado Linani, Sor, Giuliani Targa, Allard Targa, Moreno Torreba, Malats, Lopez Chavati, and Albanese, and was picked up by the audience with expressive manifestations of approval. And now there's a review that continues on about her sister, Silvia Ines Raitzin, and I think I should include that. They both studied with Targa, and we have a picture of one of her concerts from 1932, so I'll read another few minutes. It impedes us, as on other occasions in this dictionary, that we prolong its commentary by which she might have to be praised by the fact of being our disciple. Silvia Ines Raitzin, concert guitarist, sister of the previous guitarist. She was born in Buenos Aires on the 13th of March of 1918. She began her guitar studies with Professor Luis F. Benitez, then enrolled in the Academia de Guitarra Prat in 1926 at the age of 8. She has taken part in various student concerts, being distinguished in the individual numbers that were praised. As a concert guitarist, her performance in La Peña is the motive of the following commentary that we transcribe. The reunion, recently made in the location of the gathering of people of art and letters, Lepeño, she offered as notes of the main attraction their performances of the guitar and piano that were entrusted to the young girls Silvia Ines Raitzin and the young ladies Elisa and Elvira Boule, respectively. The program, interpreted for the first time by name performance, was the following: Danza by Gaito, Serenata by Malats, Minuetto by Sor, Mazurka by Taraga. Pages in which the young girl Silvia Ines Raitzin carried out with a remarkable skill that revealed her good dominion over the guitar. That's from La Prensa newspaper, Buenos Aires, December 9th, 1929, at the age of 11. Some months later, on the 17th of July of 1930, on an occasion of the 17th Concierto de la Academia de Guitarra Prat, it was headlined by three performers: the young girl Silvia Ines Raitzin, who took the first part of the program with the following works: Preludio 4, album number 3 by Pratt, Sonatina Paganini, Preludio Taraga, Serenata Malats, Zapatiato, Ross Pratt. Proceeding in a brilliant form in her studies, we presented her in public, entrusting her to the 19th Concierto of our Academia, in which she played the following program: first set, Largo by Sor, Jig by Vivaldi, Beret by Bach, Variaciones, Opus 9, Sor, Magic Flute, Mozart. Second set, Triste by Justo Morales, Vidala by Broqua, Estilo Iravi, Gatto by Pratt. Third set, Pizzicato by Taraga, Gittadeo by Carlos Pedrell, Granada, Albanese, Fandanguillo, Torino. The fact of our being our disciple impedes us from all commentary, so we offer this from the dailies. From La Prensa newspaper, December 1st, 1932, in the hall of the Wagneriana. Last night, a performance by the young Argentine guitarist Silvia Ines Raitzin was offered, who has made appreciable progress since the last time we heard her, from the technical as well as a musical point of view. Silvia Ines Raitzin, who is still quite young, she is scarcely 14 years old, appears to be orientated towards good horizons. She already possesses better skills than one would demand from an instrumentalist of her age. As for her technical dominion, her playing is firm and sure, and her sound has a volume that is somewhat rare, studies that she will be perfecting. But besides that, it isn't anything when there isn't a refined temperament by the culture to express. The young artist is musically well endowed, and all she can be is presumed that if she continues to study, listening to the best concert guitarists and taking her art in deeply, she will become an interpreter of quality, as it was at times in the performance last evening in the works of Vivaldi or Bach, with more surety in the Criollo pieces by Morales, Broqua, and Pratt. In those that she showed her worth of a lot of grace and emotion, very much ours, and in the Spanish compositions by Pedrell, Albanese, and Taraga, authors who had in her a comprehending and vigorous interpreter. The public, very numerous, applauded the guitarist very hotly at the end of every piece that was a part of the program, and the encores that she had add to the end of the concert. And so I wrote, in the same manner, the dailies La Nacion, December 1932, and El Mundo, the 2nd of December, reviewed her concert. So ends the entries of both those sisters in the Diccionario de Guitarristas y Guitarreros by Domingo Pratt. There's a photo of her, Silvia Ines, at a young age. And I'm going to show you this other inside and outside. Here's the cover of the program. So Pratt had these concerts. This is from the 19th Concierto for the Academia de Guitarra Pratt. And we see the pieces that are mentioned in the program. So this would fold in two. Silvia Ines Raitzin, Wednesday, November 30th, 1932, concert in the Sala Wagneriana. The guitar used was made by Antigua Costa Nunez. In 1870, Francisco Nunez began making guitars. Thank you.